The silence of deep space was broken by the steady hum of the Titan-class Warship Reezes as it drifted through the darkness. The massive vessel, stretching over 3 kilometers from bow to stern, moved like a sleeping giant through the Outer Rim sector. Inside the bridge, Captain Ji-won Kim sat in her command chair, reviewing reports on a holographic display that floated before her eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform was crisp despite the long months of patrol duty. Captain, we're approaching the final checkpoint of our patrol route, Lieutenant Yuna Han reported from the communications station. Her fingers danced across the console, monitoring dozens of channels for any sign of activity in this remote corner of space. G1 nodded slowly. Good. Once we complete this sweep, we can finally head back to Earth. I think everyone is ready for some real gravity under their feet. A few chuckles rippled through the bridge crew. They had been out here for nearly 8 months, watching over the edges of human-controlled space, and the journey had been quiet. Too quiet, some might say, in the engineering section deep within the ship's heart. Chief Engineer Min-ho Choi was running diagnostics on the main reactor. The enormous fusion core provided power to every system on the Reezes, from life support to the massive weapons batteries that lined the ship's hull. Min-ho wiped sweat from his forehead and checked another readout. Everything was running smoothly, just as it should be. He allowed himself a small smile. This ship was his pride and joy, and he knew every bolt and circuit like the back of his hand. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, something else moved through the void. A fleet of 12 ships, sleek and angular, cut through space with purpose. These vessels belonged to the Vrax Collective, a powerful alien civilization that had never encountered humanity before. On the bridge of the flagship, Fleet Commander Thelva stood with his forearms crossed, his scaled skin gleaming under the ship's lights. Sub-Commander Crix, what is the status of that energy signature we detected? Thelvas demanded, his voice a deep rumble that echoed through the command center. QRIX consulted his instruments, his smaller eyes narrowing as he studied the data. Commander, the signature is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be a single vessel, but the readings suggest it is massive. Perhaps 3 times the size of our flagship, Thelvas laughed, a harsh sound that made several junior officers flinch. A primitive species with a large ship, no doubt, probably some cargo hauler or colony vessel. We will investigate and determine if they have anything of value. If they resist, we will take what we want by force. The Varex fleet changed course, heading directly toward the location where the Reezes drifted. The aliens had explored hundreds of star systems and encountered dozens of species. In every case, the Varax had proven themselves superior. Their weapons were advanced, their tactics brutal, and their philosophy simple. The strong ruled, and the weak served. Thelvas had no reason to believe this encounter would be any different. Back on the Reezes, Lieutenant Han Park was conducting a routine scan of the surrounding space when his console suddenly lit up with warnings. Captain, I'm detecting multiple vessels approaching our position. 12 ships, unknown configuration, closing at high speed. Ji-won sat up straight, her relaxed posture disappearing in an instant. Battle stations, yellow alert. Yuna, can you identify them? Yuna worked quickly, running the sensor data through every database humanity had compiled. After a moment, she shook her head. Negative, Captain. These ship designs don't match anything we've encountered before. I think this might be first contact. The bridge fell silent. First contact. Those 2 words carried enormous weight. Humanity had met a few alien species in their expansion into space, but each encounter had been carefully planned and prepared. This was different. This was unexpected position, Ji-won asked, her voice calm and steady despite the racing of her heart. They'll be in visual range in approximately 4 minutes, Heian reported. Sound general quarters. Get everyone to their stations. Yuna, prepare first contact protocols. Broadcast greetings in all known languages and mathematical sequences. Let's try to make friends here. Guan touched a button on her armrest. Engineering, Min-ho, Bring the reactors to standby power. I want all systems ready to respond if needed. Down in engineering, Minho felt the familiar thrill of adrenaline as he acknowledged the order. His team moved with practiced efficiency, bringing the sleeping giant to a state of readiness. The Reezes had never been in combat, but every system had been tested and retested. If it came to a fight, they would be ready. The Vrax fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel and spread out in a standard combat formation. Thelva stared at the viewscreen, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to surprise. The vessel before them was indeed massive, larger than any ship he had ever seen. Its hull was a dark gray, covered in what appeared to be armor plating thick enough to deflect asteroids. Rows of turrets and weapons emplacements dotted its surface, though they were currently retracted and dormant. "What manner of ship is this?" Thelvas muttered. Crick's analysis. "Commander, the vessel appears to be military in nature. I'm detecting active shields, multiple reactor signatures, and extensive weapons systems. However, they are operating at minimal power. Perhaps they do not see us as a threat?" This statement brought another laugh from Thelvas, though this one was tinged with anger. "They dare to dismiss us. We are the Vurex Collective. We have conquered 20 star systems." He straightened to his full height. "Hail them. Demand they lower their shields and submit to inspection." On the Reezes, Yuna received the transmission. She worked to translate it, her face growing concerned as the meaning became clear. "Captain, they're demanding we lower our shields and allow them to board. The tone is not friendly." Guan's jaw tightened. "Send a polite response. Explain that we are on a peaceful patrol and that we welcome diplomatic contact. But we will not lower our shields for an unknown force. Make it clear we mean no harm, but will defend ourselves if necessary." The message was sent. The response from the Verax was immediate and aggressive. Thelva saw the refusal as an insult, a challenge to his authority. "They refuse? Then we will teach them respect. Weapons officer, fire a warning shot across their bow. Show them what happens to those who defy the Vrax." Crix hesitated. "Commander, perhaps we should fire." A single plasma torpedo launched from the Vrax flagship, streaking through space in a brilliant arc of blue-white energy. It passed just ahead of the Reezes and detonated against the ship's forward shields. The explosion bloomed like a small star, lighting up the darkness. On the Reezes bridge, alarms blared. Hyan's voice was sharp. "Captain, we've been fired upon." Shields held, no damage. Giwan closed her eyes for a brief moment, knowing that everything had just changed. When she opened them again, they were hard as steel. "Bring us to full alert. Power up all systems. Light up this ship like a city. I want them to see exactly what they just picked a fight with." Throughout the Reezes, systems that had been dormant roared to life. The exterior running lights blazed from dim standby to blinding brightness. Weapons turrets emerged from their protective housings and rotated toward the Vrax fleet. Shield generators increased power, creating a visible shimmer around the massive hull. The reactor output tripled, then quadrupled. From the Vrax flagship, the transformation was stunning. The dark, seemingly dormant ship suddenly became a fortress of light and power. Energy readings spiked so high that several Vrax instruments overloaded. Crix's voice was quiet, almost frightened. "Commander, I think we may have made a terrible mistake." Thelva stared at the screen, his earlier confidence wavering. But pride would not let him back down. "All ships, attack formation. Prepare to engage." Juan stood from her chair, her hands clasped behind her back. "They want to fight. Let's show them what a Titan-class warship can do." Commander Dehoshin arrived on the bridge within seconds of the alert, his uniform jacket still being fastened as he took his position beside the captain. His face was set in stern lines, the kind of expression that came from 20 years of military service. "Captain's status report." Guan gestured to the main view screen where the Vrax fleet was clearly visible, their ships moving into an aggressive formation. "Unknown aliens fired a warning shot at us. They demanded we lower our shields and submit to inspection. When we refused, they opened fire." Deho's frown deepened. Then we're at battle stations. Full alert. All systems online. But I want to try one more time to talk before we start shooting. Giwan turned to Yuna. Lieutenant Han broadcast on all frequencies. Use every first contact protocol we have. Mathematical sequences, universal constants, pictures, music, whatever it takes to make them understand we want peace. Yuna's fingers flew across her console. A captain, transmitting now on all channels. She paused, listening through her headset. Captain, I'm getting a response, but it's confusing. Their translation matrix is completely different from anything we've encountered. I'm running it through the AI translator now. The computer worked to make sense of the alien language, parsing grammar and syntax from context. After a tense minute, words began to appear on Yuna's screen. Her face went pale. Captain, they're calling us primitive. They say our attempts at communication are like animals making noise. They're demanding we surrender our ship and crew to them immediately. Deho crossed his arms. Captain, with respect, these aliens don't want peace. They want submission. We should show them the consequences of attacking a human vessel. Not yet, Commander. Guan's voice was firm. We don't know their culture or their intentions. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe in their society, this kind of posturing is normal. At the navigation station, Ensign Taiyang Ro was analyzing the movement patterns of the Vrax fleet. The young officer had graduated top of his class in tactical analysis. Something about the alien formation was bothering him. Captain, I think I see a pattern in their movements. They're trying to surround us. Classic pack-hunting behavior. Giwan nodded slowly. So they see us as prey. Yuna, send another message. Make it clear that we are not prey, we are not primitive, and we will defend ourselves if they continue their aggression. Be diplomatic, but firm. The message was sent. On the Vrax flagship, Thelvas read the translation with growing rage. The small creatures on that oversized ship dared to threaten him, dared to claim they would defend themselves against the might of the Vrax collective. His scales flushed a deep crimson, a sign of extreme anger among his species. They claim dominion over this space, Thelva snarled. They say they will defend against us, as if we are the aggressors. This insult cannot stand. All ships, weapons free. Target that vessel and reduce it to debris. Crix stepped forward, his voice urgent. Commander, please reconsider. We don't know what weapons they possess. The power readings from that ship are beyond anything we've encountered. We should withdraw and report this contact to the High Command for silence. Thelva struck his sub-commander across the face, sending Crix stumbling backward. You grow weak, Crix. The Vrax do not retreat from lesser beings. All ships, I say again, open fire. The Vrax fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma torpedoes streaked through space like angry comets. Particle beams lanced out in brilliant purple streams. Missile pods opened and disgorged their deadly cargo. The combined firepower of 12 military vessels converged on the Reezes in a display that would have vaporized a small moon. On the Reezes, Gyeon watched his tactical display with wide eyes. Captain, incoming fire, multiple weapon types, hundreds of projectiles. Brace for impact, Deho shouted. The weapons struck the Reezes' shields in a cascading explosion of energy and force. The brilliant flash was visible for thousands of kilometers, a miniature sun blooming in the darkness of space. Alarms wailed throughout the ship. Crew members grabbed onto consoles and handrails, preparing for the devastating damage that would surely follow. But when the light faded and the sensors cleared, the Reezes floated exactly where it had been. The shields showed a slight fluctuation in the readings, but they were still at 98% capacity. Not a single blast had penetrated. Not one section of hull had been scratched. In engineering, Minho let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. His console showed all systems green. The shields had absorbed the entire assault with barely any effort. Bridge, this is engineering. Shields holding steady. No damage to any system. That attack didn't even make the reactor work hard. Juon's face was grim. She had hoped it wouldn't come to this. Lieutenant Hayon Target their weapon systems only. I want them disabled, not destroyed. Show them we can defend ourselves, but make it clear we're still trying to avoid casualties. Hyan's hands moved with precision across his weapons control panel. Aye, Captain. Point defense lasers charging. Targeting solutions locked on all 12 vessels. Fire. The Reezes responded with surgical precision. Dozens of laser turrets emerged from the hull and fired simultaneously. The beams were thin, almost invisible to the naked eye, but incredibly powerful. They struck the weapon ports and missile tubes of the Vrax ships with perfect accuracy. Explosions rippled across the alien vessels as their own ammunition cooked off from the laser strikes. Thelvas was thrown from his feet as his flagship shuddered under the counterattack. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. The lighting flickered, and several systems went dark. "Report," he roared. One of his officers, her voice shaking, responded. "Commander, our forward weapons are completely destroyed. Shields are failing. They hit us before we even saw them fire." Across the fleet, the situation was the same. Every Vrax ship had lost weapons. Some had lost engines, and all of them were venting atmosphere from hull breaches. And the Reezes had barely moved. It simply hung there in space, its weapons still tracking them. Waiting, Crix pulled himself up from where he had fallen, his face bruised but his voice steady. "Commander, we must retreat. This is not a battle we can win." But Thelva's pride would not let him accept defeat so easily. "All ships, concentrate all remaining fire on their port-side weapon clusters. If we can't destroy them, we'll at least take some of their teeth." The battered Vrax fleet tried to regroup, their remaining weapons charging for another volley. On the Reezes, Tai Yang tracked their movements and shook his head. "Captain, they're preparing to fire again. They're trying to focus on our port weapons section," Guan sighed. These aliens were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Probably both. "Hyan, disable their engines?" "All of them. I want them dead in the water." "With pleasure, Captain." This time, the Reezes used its railguns. The massive electromagnetic cannons fired solid projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The rounds were the size of small cars, and when they struck the VRX ship's engine sections, the results were devastating. Fusion reactors went critical and had to be emergency shut down. Engine bells were sheared clean off. Fuel lines ruptured and spilled their contents into space. Within 30 seconds, all 12 Vrax ships were adrift, powerless and helpless. They still had life support and basic systems. But they couldn't move, and they couldn't fight. Thelvas knelt on the deck of his ruined bridge, staring at the view screen in disbelief. How had they been defeated so easily? His fleet had conquered star systems. They were warriors of the highest order. And this one ship, this single vessel of an unknown species, had brushed them aside like insects. On the Reezes, Deho turned to Giwan. "Captain, we've disabled their entire fleet. What are your orders?" Giwan stood, her expression thoughtful. "Yuna, hail them again. I want to talk to their commander." After a moment, Yuna nodded. "Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Giwan Kim of the human warship Reezes. You attacked us without provocation. You ignored our attempts at peaceful communication. But I want you to understand something. We don't want to destroy you. We disabled your ships to protect ourselves, but we took care not to kill your crews. This is your one chance to talk. Will you communicate with us now, or do we have to continue this demonstration?" The translation took a moment to reach the Vrax flagship. When it did, Thelvas heard the words, and something inside him shifted. They could have destroyed his fleet, could have killed everyone, but they chose mercy. In Vrax culture, such a thing was almost incomprehensible. The strong destroyed the weak. That was the natural order. Yet these humans had shown restraint. Before Thelvas could respond, Crix stepped forward and opened a channel. "I am Sub-Commander Crix of the Vrax Collective. We will listen to your words, Captain Kim of the Reezes." Giwan allowed herself a small smile. Finally, progress. "Good, now let's start over. I'm going to send over supplies and medical aid for your damaged ships. Then we're going to have a conversation about why shooting at strangers is a very bad idea. Daeho leaned close to her. Captain, sensors are detecting a massive energy buildup in the next sector. Multiple ship signatures. Jiwon's smile faded. How many? More than 200, Captain. And they're heading this way fast. She closed her eyes briefly. This day just kept getting better and better. Sound the alarm. It looks like this battle isn't over yet. The bridge of the Reezes transformed in seconds. Holographic displays flickered to life all around the command center, showing tactical readouts, damage assessments, and projected battle scenarios. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing exactly what their role would be in the coming fight. Lieutenant Yunbi Kong stood at her tactical station, her fingers dancing across multiple screens at once. She was responsible for coordinating the Reezes' defensive and offensive systems. And right now, those systems were about to get a serious workout. Captain, I'm reading 214 vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel. They're arranging into battle formations. Configuration matches the ships we just engaged. Distance? Jiwon asked, her voice calm despite the overwhelming odds they were facing. 40,000 kilometers in closing. They'll be in weapons range in approximately 6 minutes at current speed. Yunbi pulled up a holographic display showing the approaching fleet. It was massive, filling the space before them with hundreds of warships, down in the marine quarters. Major Seojin Nam was already suited up in his combat armor. The Marine commander had been preparing his troops for potential boarding actions since the first shots were fired. Now he stood before his assembled soldiers, 200 of the finest fighters humanity had to offer. Listen up. Seojin's voice carried authority that came from years of combat experience. We've got a fleet bearing down on us. If they manage to get through our defenses and attempt boarding, we will be ready. This is our ship, our home, and nobody takes it from us. Understood, sir? Yes, sir? The response was immediate and fierce. Seojin nodded with satisfaction. Good. Defensive positions, everyone. Let's show these aliens what human Marines can do. On the bridge, Hyun was running calculations on his weapons systems. The young lieutenant had a gift for tactical thinking, and his mind was already working through dozens of combat scenarios. Captain, I recommend we maneuver to keep the disabled Vrak ships behind us. Use them as a shield while we engage the incoming fleet. Daeho shook his head. That would put those ships in our firing solution? If we miss our targets, we could hit them. Exactly what I'm counting on, Commander, Hyun replied. The incoming fleet won't fire on their own people. It limits their options and gives us better positioning. Kwan considered this for a moment, then made her decision. Negative, Lieutenant. We're not using disabled ships as shields. That's not who we are. Instead, we're going to put ourselves between them and the incoming fleet. Tai Yang positioned us to protect those 12 ships. Tai Yang's hands moved across his navigation controls. Aye, Captain. Moving to defensive position now. The massive Reezes rotated in space with surprising grace for something so large. Placing itself between the disabled Vrak's vessels and their incoming reinforcements, Minho, watching from engineering, felt a surge of pride. This was what the Titan-class ships were built for. Not to attack, but to defend. To be the shield that protected others, even former enemies. Engineering to bridge, Minho reported. All systems at full capacity. Reactor output is stable. We can maintain maximum power for up to 72 hours of continuous combat, acknowledged engineering. Good work. Giwan turned her attention back to the view screen as the Varak's warfleet came into visual range. It was an intimidating sight. Hundreds of ships, all bristling with weapons, all bearing down on a single target. On the lead vessel of the approaching fleet, Admiral Vexther stood in his command throne. The ancient Vrox warrior had fought in more battles than most of his crew had lived years. His scales were scarred and weathered, and his 4 eyes held the cold calculation of a born predator. He had received Thelva's distress signal and brought the full might of the regional fleet to respond. Show me this vessel that dares to attack our people, Vexther commanded. The view screen zoomed in on the Reezes, and even the High Admiral felt a moment of pause. The ship was enormous, yes, but what struck him was the way it positioned itself. It wasn't trying to flee. It wasn't hiding behind the disabled vessels. It was standing between them and his fleet, protecting them. Curious, Vexter muttered. They defend ships that attacked them. Sub-Commander, hail that vessel. I wish to speak with their commander. On the Reezes, Una received the incoming transmission. Captain, the lead ship is hailing us. Audio and visual. Put them through. The view screen shifted to show High Admiral Vexter in all his imposing presence. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, filled with authority. I am High Admiral Vexter of the Vrox Collective's Third Fleet. You have attacked our ships and disabled our warriors. For this crime, you will surrender your vessel immediately and submit to judgment. Your crew will be imprisoned, and your technology will be seized. These are the only terms I offer. Juan stood and walked closer to the view screen, meeting the High Admiral's gaze without flinching. I am Captain Jiwon Kim of the human warship Reezes. Your ships attacked us first, without warning or provocation. We defended ourselves and showed mercy by not destroying vessels we easily could have. If you want to discuss crimes, let's start with your fleet commander who fired on us during a peaceful first contact. Vexter's scales shifted to an angry red color. You dare to speak to me of mercy? You, who hide behind a single ship? I have brought 200 warships. You cannot hope to stand against such force. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. I don't think so, Giwan replied calmly. You're welcome to try attacking us, but I should warn you, your 12 ships learned a hard lesson today. We really don't want to have to teach it to another 200. The transmission ended. Vexter turned to his weapons officer. All ships, attack formation Delta. Concentrate fire on that vessel's bridge section. I want it destroyed. Back on the Reezes, Deho looked at Jiwan with concern. Captain, we've never faced odds like this. Even a Titan-class ship has limits. Then I guess we're about to find out what those limits are. Juan returned to her command chair. All hands, this is the captain. Battle stations. We're about to engage a fleet of over 200 hostile vessels. Our mission is simple. Protect the disabled ships behind us, and show these aliens that humanity doesn't back down from bullies, no matter how many of them there are. All weapons free. Engage at will. Yunbi coordinated with Hyun, splitting their attention between offense and defense. Point defense systems online. Main batteries charged. Missile tubes loaded. We're ready, Captain. The Vrax fleet opened fire as one. The volume of weapons discharge was staggering. Thousands of plasma torpedoes, particle beams, and missiles filled the space between the two forces. It looked like a wall of death, enough firepower to level a continent, all focused on a single ship. The Rise's defensive systems came alive. Point defense lasers fired in a continuous stream, creating a web of energy that intercepted missiles before they could reach the hull. The shields flared bright as plasma torpedoes impacted, but they held firm. Particle beams splashed across the energy barrier like water against stone. Shields holding at 87%, Yunbi reported. Point defense is eliminating 93% of incoming missiles. We can sustain this rate of fire for extended periods, Juan nodded. Good. Now let's show them what happens when you make a Titan angry. Hyun, full barrage. Target their weapons and engines. I want precision, not destruction. The Reezes unleashed its full arsenal for the first time. Main railguns fired in sequence, each shot capable of punching through a battleship. Missile batteries launched swarms of smart munitions that weaved through space, seeking their targets with deadly accuracy. Laser arrays painted enemy holes and burned through armor to reach critical systems. And above it all, the massive energy cannons mounted along the ship's spine charged up and fired beams of pure, destructive force. The effect was devastating. Vrak ships exploded, not from hull breaches, but from their own weapons, cooking off as the Reezes' fire disabled their safety systems. Engines went dark as railgun rounds tore through them. Shields collapsed under sustained laser bombardment. And through it all, the Reezes barely moved, a fortress in space that absorbed everything thrown at it, and returned fire 100-fold. Minho monitored the power consumption from engineering. Bridge, reactor output at 68% and steady. We're using less power than I estimated. These systems are incredibly efficient. Vexter watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. Ships that had served for decades were reduced to drifting hulks in minutes. The return fire from his vessels barely seemed to scratch the human ship's shields. It was impossible. No single vessel should be able to stand against such numbers. All ships concentrate fire on a single point. Overload their shields through focused assault. The High Admiral's voice carried a note of desperation now. The Vrax fleet tried to regroup. Dozens of ships focusing their weapons on the Reezes' forward shields. The energy buildup was immense, and when they fired together, the explosion was bright enough to be seen from planets light years away. The Reezes shuddered slightly. Alarms rang out on the bridge. Yunbi checked her displays. Forward shields down to 42%. They found our weak spot. Rotate shield harmonics, G1 ordered. Route power from aft shields to forward. Taiyang pitches 30 degrees upward. Present our dorsal armor to their fire. The massive ship responded, changing its angle to present fresh shields to the enemy. The Varrock's concentrated fire hit reinforced armor plating backed by energy barriers, and the effect was much less pronounced. Heen saw the opportunity. Captain, they've clustered together to concentrate fire. Request permission to use the gravity well generator. Guan hesitated. The gravity well generator was one of the Reezes' most powerful weapons, but it was also indiscriminate. It could affect friendly ships as easily as hostile ones, but the disabled Vrox vessels were behind them, safe from the effect. Permission granted. Fire when ready. Deep in the ship's core, a massive device powered up. It created a controlled singularity, a miniature black hole that lasted only seconds but had devastating effects. When he inactivated it, space itself seemed to warp and bend. The tightly grouped Vrax ships were suddenly pulled together by irresistible gravitational force. Hulls collided, shields overlapped and overloaded, and chaos erupted in their formation. Follow up with missile barrage, Giwan commanded. Target their command ships. Smart missiles launched from the Reezes, using the confusion to slip past defensive systems. They struck command bridges and communication arrays, cutting off coordination between ships. The Vrax fleet, already reeling from casualties, began to fall apart as a fighting force. On the Vrax flagship, Crix had been monitoring the battle from his damaged ship. He opened a channel to High Admiral Vexter. Admiral, this is Subcommander Crix. I urge you to cease fire. We attacked them first. They defended the ships that attacked them, rather than use us as shields. They could have destroyed us all, but chose restraint. This is not an enemy we should be fighting. Vexter wanted to roar in denial, but he was a warrior first and a fool never. He looked at his tactical display. Half his fleet was disabled or destroyed. The human ship showed minimal damage. And worse, his own people were being protected by that same human vessel. What kind of species protected those who had tried to kill them? Before Vexter could respond, new contacts appeared on his sensors. For massive energy signatures, each matching the size of the Reezes, dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Behind them came dozens of smaller human warships. On the Reezes bridge, Yuna smiled with relief. Captain, friendly vessels detected. It's Fleet Admiral Kang Ho with reinforcements. Giwan allowed herself a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Kang Ho had been 3 days away when she sent the distress signal. He must have pushed his ships to their limits to arrive this quickly. The communication channel opened, and Fleet Admiral Kang Ho Beek's weathered face appeared on screen. The old admiral had more years in space than most of the Reezes' crew had been alive. Captain Kim, I see you've been making friends again. Status report. Admiral, we've engaged 2 separate VOX forces. The first attacked us without provocation. The second arrived as reinforcements. We've disabled approximately half their total fleet while defending the vessels from the first engagement. No human casualties. Kang Ho nodded slowly, his eyes taking in the tactical situation. I see. And the Vracs. Are they still hostile? Before Giwan could answer, Vexther's face appeared on a split screen. The High Admiral looked old and tired suddenly. I am High Admiral Vexther. Request a ceasefire. We will stand down. From his disabled flagship, Thelvas transmitted as well. This is Fleet Commander Thelvas. I attacked the human vessel first. The fault for this conflict is mine. Captain Kim showed mercy when she could have shown destruction. I ask that she'll extend that mercy once more. Kang Ho looked at Giwan with something like pride in his eyes. Captain, you're the one they attacked. This is your call. Chuan stood, her uniform dirty and her face showing the strain of the battle, but her voice was firm and clear. Ceasefire accepted. All vessels hold fire. Prepare medical and repair teams. We're going to help these ships get back on their feet. Maybe then we can actually talk like civilized people. Around the Reezes, the thunder of weapons fire finally fell silent. In the sudden quiet, hundreds of ships from 2 different species floated in space, no longer enemies, but not yet friends. It was a beginning, though. A chance for something better than war. Minho's voice came over the internal cum. Captain, we were only at 71% power output, right? We never even came close to our actual limits. Juan smiled slightly. I know, Minho. I know. But they don't need to know that. Not yet, anyway. The Titan had awakened, and the galaxy would never look at humanity quite the same way again. The hours following the ceasefire were tense. Medical shuttles and repair drones moved between the human and Vrax vessels, carrying supplies and personnel. Dr. Sora Lee worked tirelessly in the Reezes medical bay, treating wounded Vrax soldiers alongside her own people. The aliens were different from humans in many ways, but their injuries were universal. Burns, broken bones, trauma from explosive decompression. Pain knew no species. Sora carefully set a Vrax warrior's fractured arm, using instruments that had to be adjusted for the alien's unique physiology. The warrior watched her with all 4 eyes, confusion evident in his expression. Why do you help us? We tried to kill you. In Vrax culture, the defeated serve the victorious, or they die. There is no mercy. Sora looked up from her work, meeting his gaze steadily. Because in human culture, we help those who need help. Win or lose doesn't matter when someone is hurt, and we can do something about it. She finished the cast and checked her scanner. There, you'll need to keep that still for a few days while the bone knits. But you should make a full recovery. The warrior stared at his arm, then at Sora. I do not understand your people. That's okay, Sora replied with a tired smile. Right now, you don't have to understand. You just have to heal. On the bridge, Jawan was in a tense conversation with Fleet Admiral Kang Ho via secure channel. The old admiral's holographic image stood before her, his expression thoughtful. You handled this well, Juan. Better than I might have, honestly. But now, we need to figure out what comes next. We've just made first contact with a militaristic alien species, and it started with a battle. The politicians back home are going to have a lot of questions. Die. I know, sir. But I don't think these Varax are simply warlike for the sake of it. There's something more to their culture. Jawan pulled up a report on her datapad. Lieutenant Bowman-Yoon Intelligence has been analyzing their communications and behavior. He thinks he's found something important. As if summoned, Lieutenant Bowman appeared on the bridge, carrying a tablet filled with data. The young intelligence officer looked like he hadn't slept since the battle began. His uniform rumpled, and his eyes red from staring at screens. But there was excitement in his voice. Captain Admiral, I believe I've figured out the core of Vrax culture. They're not just warriors. They're hierarchical to an extreme degree. Strength determines rank, and rank determines worth. When they attacked us and we defeated them, we didn't just win a battle. We proved we were stronger, which in their worldview means we're superior. Kang Ho frowned. So they think we own them now? Possibly, sir. But it's more complex than that. They also have a concept of honorable strength versus dishonorable strength. When Captain Kim chose not to destroy their ships, when she positioned the Reezes to protect them, she demonstrated strength combined with restraint. That's something they respect deeply. Guan considered this. So we need to be careful how we approach them. We can't be weak, or they'll lose respect for us. But we can't be cruel, or they'll see us as dishonorable. Exactly. Captain, meanwhile in the civilian quarters of the Reezes, Ambassador Juna Oh was preparing for what might be the most important diplomatic mission of her career. Juna had been aboard the Reezes to gain experience in deep space before taking up a post on one of the colony worlds. She'd never expected to be involved in First Contact, let alone First Contact that had started with a battle. She reviewed everything Bowman had sent her about Vrak's culture, making notes and trying to understand a species whose values were so different from her own. The door chimed and Ji-Wan entered, looking exhausted but determined. Ambassador, oh, thank you for agreeing to help with this. Juna smiled. Captain, this is literally what I trained for. Though I admit, the training scenarios never involved quite this much shooting. She gestured to a chair. I think I have an approach that might work. The Vraks respect strength, but they also respect leaders who show wisdom. We need to frame this entire incident not as humans conquering Vraks, but as two powerful civilizations learning to coexist. Can you make that work? I can try, but I'll need your support, Captain. They respect you. You're the one who defeated them but also protected them. In their eyes, you're both a warrior and a leader worth following. Guan sighed. I didn't want to be anyone's leader. I just wanted to get my ship and crew home safely. Sometimes we don't get to choose our roles, Captain. We just have to play them the best we can. The meeting was arranged on neutral ground, a cargo hold on one of the damaged Vrax vessels that had been cleared and equipped with life support for both species. Ji-Wan arrived with Juna and Deho, while the Varric sent High Admiral Vexthur Thelvas. And Crix, the two groups faced each other across a hastily assembled table. Vexthur spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of his years. Captain Kim, I have lived for 63 cycles. I have fought in 47 battles. I have conquered 14 systems. Never in all that time have I seen anything like what you and your ship did today. You stood alone against my fleet and did not break. You protected enemies who had fired on you first. You showed strength and mercy in equal measure. I must know, is this common among your kind? Guan chose her words carefully. High Admiral, humanity has known war. We've fought among ourselves for thousands of years. We've learned hard lessons about the cost of conflict and the value of restraint. When we built ships like the Reezes, we built them not to conquer but to defend, to protect what we value. Thelvas, his scales, still showing traces of shame color, leaned forward. But you could have destroyed us. You could have taken our territory, our resources. Why didn't you? Because we don't want your territory, Juna interjected smoothly. Humanity has plenty of space to grow into. We're exploring and colonizing, yes, but we're not looking to subjugate other species. We'd much rather have neighbors than subjects. Crix's eyes brightened with understanding. You seek equals, not subordinates. Exactly, Ji-Wan confirmed. We didn't come out here looking for a fight. But when you forced one on us, we ended it as quickly as possible, with the least amount of bloodshed. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Vexthur was quiet for a long moment, his four eyes studying Ji-Wan intensely. Among my people, there is an old saying, the strongest tree is not the one that never bends, but the one that bends without breaking. I think perhaps your species understands this truth. Perhaps we do, Ji-Wan agreed. The question is, what do we do now? We can't undo what happened, but we can decide what comes next. Before anyone could respond, an urgent transmission came through. Yuna's voice was tight with concern. Captain, we're detecting a distress signal from one of the damaged Vrak ships. Their reactor is going critical. They have maybe 10 minutes before it explodes. Ji-Wan was on her feet instantly. Which ship? The destroyer on the port side of their formation. They took heavy damage to their engineering section. Captain, if that reactor goes up, it could trigger a chain reaction with the other damaged ships. Dexter's face went pale. That ship carries 300 crew members, and if it explodes as you say, it could destroy 5 more vessels in the blast radius. How many total? Guan demanded. Nearly 2,000 lives, Crix answered quietly. Guan grabbed her communicator. Minho, I need a repair team suited up and ready to go in 2 minutes. We have a Vrax reactor about to explode. Captain, our people don't know Vrax reactor systems, Minho protested. Then they'll learn fast. Move, Thelva stood as well. Captain, I have engineers who know our systems. Let us help. Within minutes, a joint human Vrax team was racing toward the dying ship. Minho led the human contingent, while a Vrax engineer named Tekler guided them through the alien vessel's corridors. Smoke filled the passageways. Emergency lights flickered. The crew had already evacuated 2 escape pods, but the reactor didn't care about empty corridors. If it went critical, it would still explode. They reached engineering to find the reactor core glowing an ominous red, pulsing with barely contained energy. Tekler immediately moved to the controls, his hands flying over the interface. The containment field is collapsing. We need to vent the plasma buildup, but the venting system is damaged. Minho studied the setup, comparing it to human reactor designs. The principles were similar, even if the technology was different. Can we route the vents through the damaged sections? Let the plasma burn out into space. Yes, but someone would have to manually open the backup valves. They're in the reactor chamber itself. The radiation would kill anyone in minutes, not if they're in a proper suit. Minho checked his gear. Human radiation suits were designed to handle work in the most extreme environments. Show me where. Together, Human and Vrax worked to save the ship. Minho entered the reactor chamber, the heat and radiation warnings on his suit climbing into dangerous levels. He found the valves, massive mechanical systems that had frozen from damage. Using pure physical strength and tools from his kit, he forced them open one by one. Superheated plasma vented into space in brilliant streams of energy. On the bridge of the Reezes, everyone watched the reactor readings. Sora stood by, ready to treat Minho for radiation exposure the moment he was clear. The temperature began to drop. The pulsing slowed. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, Tekler's voice came through. Reactor stable. Crisis averted. Cheers erupted on both human and Vrax ships. Minho staggered out of the reactor chamber, his suit systems maxed out, but holding. Tekler caught him as he stumbled. You've saved my people. You risked your life for Vrax you don't even know. Minho managed a weak smile. That's what engineers do. We fix things. Doesn't matter whose things they are. Back in the meeting room, Vexter looked at Jiwan with new eyes. You saved our warriors even as we negotiate. You ask for nothing in return. We ask for peace, Juna said firmly. We ask for understanding. And maybe, if we're very fortunate, we ask for friendship. Vexter extended his hand in the human gesture he had learned. Then let us begin again, not as enemies, but as those who have fought and found respect in battle. Ji-Wen took his hand. Agreed. Welcome to the first day of human-Rax relations. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even easy. But it was a start. 6 months had passed since that first violent contact in deep space. The location that had once been a battlefield was now something entirely different, a joint human-Vrax research station. Built from the salvaged remains of damaged ships and new construction materials brought by both species, it floated in space like a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Captain Juan Kim stood on the observation deck of the Reezes, looking out at the station. Her ship was currently docked for routine maintenance and resupply. But more importantly, it was serving as the honor guard for a historic event. Today marked the official signing of the Human-Vrax Cooperation Treaty. Captain, you're needed at the ceremony in 20 minutes, Yuna reminded her gently. The communications officer had taken on a new role over the past months. She had immersed herself in learning the Vrax language, spending hours in study and practice. Now she served as the chief translator for all official communications between the two species. Her skill had become so refined that she could pick up on subtle nuances, that even the computer translators missed. I know. I just needed a moment to myself first. Gi-Wan turned from the window. Hard to believe it's only been half a year. Feels like a lifetime ago that we were shooting at each other. Yuna smiled. A lot has changed. Did you hear that Lieutenant Heian is teaching a class on human tactical doctrine at the Vrayax Military Academy? Apparently, they're very interested in our concept of proportional response. Proportional response. Is that what we're calling it now? Juan chuckled. I seem to remember we disabled their entire fleet in about 15 minutes. Yes, but you could have destroyed it in 5. That's the proportion they find fascinating. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Sora Lee was wrapping up a joint research session with her Vrax counterpart, a physician named Helrix. The two had been working together to create a comprehensive medical database that covered both species. It had led to some surprising discoveries. Look at this protein sequence. Sora pointed to a holographic display showing complex molecular structures. Vrax and human biology both use a nearly identical enzyme for cellular repair. The odds of that developing independently are astronomical. Helrix examined the data with fascination. Do you think our species share a common ancestor? Perhaps an ancient precursor race that seeded life across the galaxy? Maybe. Or maybe there are simply certain patterns that work well for carbon-based life, regardless of where it evolves. Sora saved the data to their shared files. Either way, this means we can potentially modify some of our medical treatments to work on both species. That could save lives in the future. Indeed. I must admit, Dr. Lee, when I first came aboard this ship, I expected to find barbarians who had won through simple luck and overwhelming firepower. Instead, I found scientists, artists, philosophers. You are more like us than we ever imagined. Sora smiled warmly. And we found warriors with a deep sense of honor. Engineers with brilliant minds, and a culture that values strength not for its own sake, but as a means to protect what matters. We're more alike than different, really. In the engineering section, Minho was showing a group of Vrax engineers the inner workings of the Rise's main reactor. The aliens were fascinated by the human approach to power generation, which emphasized redundancy and safety over pure output. You see these secondary containment fields? Minho gestured to the glowing barriers around the reactor core. If the primary field fails, we have 3 backup systems. And if those fail, the reactor automatically ejects the core into space where it can safely burn out without endangering the ship. A young Vrax engineer named Peltok shook his head in wonder. We designed for maximum power with minimal safety margins. The strong should not need such protections. But I begin to see the wisdom in your approach. A reactor that melts down during battle is no reactor at all. Exactly. It's not about being strong enough to survive without protection. It's about being smart enough to protect yourself so you can keep being strong. Minho patted the reactor housing affectionately. This beauty has never let me down because I never ask it to do something it can't safely handle. On the Joint Research Station, the ceremony hall was filling with representatives from both species. Human diplomats in formal attire mingled with Vrax officials whose scales had been polished to a brilliant sheen. Ambassador Juna O moved through the crowd with practiced grace, making introductions and smoothing over the occasional cultural misunderstanding. She spotted Thelva speaking with Commander Deho and made her way over. The former fleet commander had undergone quite a transformation in the past months. No longer the arrogant warrior who had fired the first shot. He had become one of the strongest advocates for human-Rax cooperation. Ambassador Othelvus greeted her with a respectful bow. I was just telling Commander Shin about the changes in our military training. We are now teaching our cadets about your concept of winning without fighting. It is challenging for some of our more traditional instructors. Deho smiled. I imagine it is, but I think it's valuable. Wars are expensive in resources and in lives. If you can achieve your goals through negotiation or intimidation rather than actual combat, everyone benefits. This is what the human ship Reezes taught us, Thelvas agreed. Captain Kim could have destroyed my fleet. Instead, she showed us that true strength includes the wisdom to know when not to use it. This is a lesson the Vrax needed to learn. Ambassador Juna felt a surge of pride. This was what diplomacy was supposed to achieve, not just the absence of war, but genuine understanding between different peoples. The ceremony began with High Admiral Vexter and Fleet Admiral Kang Ho, both speaking about the journey from conflict to cooperation. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The signing of the treaty itself. G1 stood on the stage alongside other human and Vrax leaders. The treaty was a comprehensive document that covered everything from trade agreements to mutual defense pacts. It established clear boundaries for both species' territories, while creating shared zones where joint projects could be undertaken. It set up protocols for peaceful conflict resolution and created a joint council to govern interactions between the two civilizations. But more than that, it was a symbol, a statement that species who had met with violence could choose to build something better. As Juan added her signature to the document, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The fear and confusion of that first encounter, the chaos of battle, the moment when she had chosen mercy over destruction. Every decision had led to this moment. The signing complete, Vexter addressed the assembled crowd. Today we mark the end of hostility and the beginning of alliance. The humans have shown us that strength without wisdom is merely brutality. We have shown them that honor and courage still have value in the modern galaxy. Together we are stronger than we ever were apart. Kang Ho spoke next. The Reezes and its sister ships were built to defend humanity. But today we realize that perhaps their true purpose is larger. They stand not just for Earth, but for the principle that power should protect, not oppress. That civilizations can grow stronger through cooperation rather than conquest. After the ceremony, there was a reception where the real work of relationship building continued. Jawan found herself cornered by a group of Rax military commanders who wanted to know every detail of the Titan-class ship's capabilities. She deflected with practiced skill, sharing enough to maintain respect while keeping the truly sensitive information classified. Crix rescued her, guiding her away from the crowd to a quieter corner. The sub-commander had become a good friend over the months, often serving as a cultural guide to help humans understand Vrax thinking. Captain Kim, I wanted to thank you personally, Crix said quietly. When we first met, I was certain we would all die. Thelvis's pride had doomed us, and I could see no way out. But you gave us a path forward. You gave us honor in defeat, which became honor in alliance. You gave us something too, Crix. You showed us that even when misunderstandings lead to conflict, communication and patience can lead to peace. Not every first contact needs to end in lasting enmity, true, though I suspect not every species would respond as well as we have. The Varix respects strength, and you demonstrated it. But what happens when you encounter a species that sees your mercy as weakness to exploit? Kuan's expression grew serious. Then we hope the reputation we've built together serves as a deterrent. Let the galaxy know that humanity will defend itself and its allies with overwhelming force if necessary, but always prefers peace. Fear of what we could do might prevent us from having to actually do it. Later that evening, the senior staff of the recess gathered in the captain's ready room for a private celebration. Giwan poured drinks for everyone, a bottle of Earth whiskey she'd been saving for a special occasion. To the Reezes, Deho toasted. And to the crew that proved a single ship can change the course of history. To peace, Yuna added. Hard-won and carefully maintained. 2 new friends, Minho contributed, even ones who tried to blow us up at first. Sora raised her glass. To the future. May it be brighter than the past. Guan looked at her crew, these people who had stood with her through uncertainty and danger. To all of you, we were given an impossible situation, and we found a way through it. Not with more violence, but with courage and compassion. You make me proud to wear this uniform. They drank together, sharing stories and laughter as the stars wheeled overhead. The next morning, Chuan stood on the bridge as the Reezes prepared to depart. Their next assignment was to escort a convoy of joint human Vrax ships on a scientific expedition to an unexplored system. It was exactly the kind of mission the Titan-class ships had been designed for, protection and support for peaceful endeavors. Captain, all stations report ready for departure, Taeyong reported from navigation. All escort ships are in formation, Hyun added. 3 Vrax destroyers and 2 human frigates. We have a full battle group for this expedition. Giwan settled into her command chair. It felt right somehow to be embarking on this new journey with former enemies as allies. Excellent. Tai Yang set course for the Kepler 442 system. Standard cruise speed. The Reezes and its convoy engaged their faster-than-light drives. Guan reflected on how much had changed. When they had left Earth on patrol 8 months ago, humanity had been alone in this sector of space. Now they had allies, partners, friends even. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been misunderstandings and setbacks. Cultural differences that seemed impossible to bridge. Moments when it felt like peace would never be possible. But they had persevered, both species learning and growing together. Deho moved to stand beside her chair. Captain, the Admiral wants to know if you think the peace will last. Guan considered the question carefully. Her eyes on the view screen where both human and Vrax ships traveled together through the stars. Peace is like our ship's commander. It requires constant maintenance, tremendous energy, and people willing to protect it. She turned to him with a slight smile. But yes, I think it will last. We showed them our strength. Now we're showing them our character. That's the combination they never expected, and it's the combination that will keep us together. She stood and walked to the view screen, watching the swirl of hyperspace outside. Somewhere out there were new worlds to explore, new species to meet, new challenges to face. But for the first time since humanity had reached for the stars, they wouldn't be facing those challenges alone. The Reezes had been built as a weapon, a Titan-class warship capable of devastating destruction. But it had become something more, a symbol of what humanity stood for. A guardian not just of Earth, but of the principles of honor, mercy, and cooperation. The ship that had won a battle without wanting one had become the ship that won a peace worth keeping. And in the cold vastness of space, that was perhaps the greatest victory of all. The convoy jumped faster than light travel. Disappearing into the stars together, human and Vrax side by side, heading toward whatever the future held. The Titan had awakened, not to bring war, but to stand as proof that strength and compassion could coexist, that different species could find common ground, and that the measure of true power wasn't in how many enemies you could destroy, but in how many friends you could make. Captain Jiwan Kim smiled as she settled back into her chair. The Reezes hummed with power around her, ready for whatever came next, and she knew with absolute certainty that they would face it together.